So I wanted to say good evening to everyone. I've had a chance to be talking to people who have attended tonight, and I want to thank every single one of you for attending. It's bitter cold out tonight. It's a winter night, and I'm so pleased that you're here. I want to mention that first and foremost that we have scouts here from Troop 89. And we had this wonderful period before we started this presentation for questions and answers. And I am actually the mom of 4 children, 2 daughters and 2 sons. Both my sons are Eagle Scouts. I welcome these scouts here. I thought their questions were excellent, and I hopefully helpful to you as you move forward with anything that you're doing with your school work and with your community work and with your scout work. So welcome here. And I wanted to take a moment to introduce to you, this is Amanda Bernardo, who is my legislative aide. And I represent 40,000 people and have 1 staff person. And luckily Amanda has Morgan, who's interning with us. And I wanted to take a moment to turn this mic over to Mike Sullivan, who is, of course, your town administrator, who we have just identified as being the longest serving town administrator in the Commonwealth, and who is an absolute pleasure to work with. So I wanted to give him a few moments here.
Sure. Thanks, Denise, and welcome to your State of the Town, State of the Speech. So we weren't sure which one it was going to be, so we put both flags, the town flag and the state flag, as well as the American. The fact that I've been here 40 years just means that to me, you're just a kid. Perfect. So you were probably in high school when I started working here. So, but now that you're starting your 5th year with us, and I know you were talking to some of our guests here earlier about the breadth of the projects that you have to deal with, and they are enormous. I was talking to Representative Garlick earlier in the day, and we were talking about a hypodermic syringe disposal program. We were talking about the MBTA's potential purchase of the rail line through Medfield that crosses 109. We were talking about snow removal costs, all of these issues that she has to be familiar with, the Medfield State Hospital issues, but she has good experience. I don't know if any of you have heard the governor and the lieutenant governor that just took office a few weeks ago, but they keep emphasizing in their remarks that they have been selectmen. The governor was a selectman in the town of Swampscott. The lieutenant governor was a selectman in the town of Shrewsbury, and Denise was a selectman in the town of Needham, which, by the way, is the town where the new governor grew up. So it's very helpful to have someone who understands the problem of local government representing us at the state level, and she's done an excellent job. I'm sure she learned more about real estate and Medfield State Hospital in her tenure in Medfield, and she was very instrumental in helping us guide through a 10-year effort that we've had to acquire the state hospital property. When the selectmen finally signed the papers, I turned to them and I said, how does it feel to become slum landlords? Because we now have 56 or odd decrepit buildings up there that we have to figure out what to do. And that's one reason why the selectmen aren't here tonight. They're having, the hospital committee is conducting interviews for the consultants to come up with a master plan for reuse of the state hospital. So, but back to Denise, I think we're so pleased to have her. You know, you always hear about the federal and state government, how they can't work together. The Democrats and the Republicans can't get along. Well, I think we could teach them lessons here at the local level. Medfield, even though we're only 12,000 people, we have 2 representatives. Denise is representative for Norfolk 13, precincts 1 and 2, which for the most part, if you live north of Route 109, she's your representative. If you live south of 109 like I do, I live on Nebo Street, then we have Representative Sean Dooley, who's a Republican. So Denise and Sean and our Senator Jim Timilty all work together very well on behalf of the town, and they could probably go down to Washington and teach those guys a thing or two. So I won't tie you up anymore, except there was one of the comments earlier, or one of the questions was, would you like to be president? And Denise indicated that she didn't want to be president. And part of the reason for that is she's already been president. I don't know if you know any of her past history, but Denise was president of the Mass Nurses Association. So she's already been a president. And with that, Denise, I'll turn it over to you, and welcome and thanks for coming.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. Lovely introduction. Thank you. Thank you. So that was just lovely, Mike, and I appreciate that. So we're on a little bit of a different schedule, so we're going to flip right through this. And I just wanted to say, one of the things I want to share with people is that we are doing well in Massachusetts. If we only read the headlines, we might be pretty worried about how things are going. Massachusetts is doing well. In 2013, we created more jobs than any time since the year 2000. The Mass Biotech Council is reporting that we've done more research and development than any other state. We actually are the leader in the state, I think right behind California on the life sciences issue. The Atlantic List, Greater Boston, is the third highest area in the United States for recent college graduates to get jobs, which is really important because a couple of years ago we were worrying about the graying of Massachusetts, and our young people were going through college and leaving the state to get jobs, and now we're finding that they're staying here. And when I talk to you about public education and how proud I am of the town of Medfield and the kind of job that you all as students are doing, and your school administrators and your teachers and the support of your town, Massachusetts actually ranks #1 in the country in public education. And I think we should be telling each other that every single day. I told you, I had a chance to tell you that I'm the vice chair of the Joint Committee on Education. I serve on the Joint Committee on Public Health and the Joint Committee on Mental Health and Substance Abuse. So when we were doing the question time and we were talking about the opiate crisis, I was very involved in those discussions and in the developing of that kind of policy there. On public health, we're always discussing those issues, and that very issue is what Mike was talking about when he was talking about the issue of syringes and how we dispose of them and how we take care of the people who have medical needs. At the same time, we're talking about our public safety and our public works people and who's picking up the tab for the disposal of those kind of things. We have to talk about that. And on education, we had a chance to talk about how that is an everyday conversation in the district that I represent. And I also joined a whole bunch of caucuses. Issues that I care about, I join with other representatives who care about those issues. So I'm on a caucus for people with disabilities. I'm on a caucus around our libraries and do a lot of work with the Medfield Library on that. I'm on a high-tech caucus because that's an important driver for the economy in Massachusetts. So I join with other representatives consistently because one voice is good, two voices is better. The more and more voices actually moves policy. And this is the way I look at my job. And so you see at the top of that pyramid, it says constituent services. That is, to me, the highest calling of my job. And it is what I spend a lot of time on. I think people picture a representative and they think that I am voting nonstop. Well, trust me, you don't want me voting nonstop on anything because every time I vote, it's a law. And we don't want 24/7 laws, 7 days a week. What I do is I actually deal with the towns that I represent. I deal with the people in those towns, sometimes who are just kind of banging their head up against state government, and they make a call to our office, and it's usually the call of their last resort when they don't know what else to do, and they'll call our office. Our building inspector is here tonight, and we were able to be helpful to a resident in the town who had worked so long and so hard and used every avenue that they knew how to use to deal with an issue around the gas company, and the building inspector advised them to give us a call, and we were able to help with that issue. So there's a lot of issues that you don't see in the paper from week to week, but are the issues that we concentrate on. The second is on the issue around the budget. This issue is something I deal with every single day, the state budget. The state budget is $37 billion. We deal with that every single day. The decisions, in my opinion, a budget is your values. The things that you value is where you put your money. So I watch very carefully about where that money is, who that money is being used for, and are we getting an effective use out of that money. And then legislation is, of course, the passing of laws. And we meet, and this is something I want to share especially with our scouts. So you will get the Medfield paper, and the paper will say, you'll say, you know, I met Denise Garlick. I think I like her. I think I'm going to see what it says about her in the paper. And you open up the paper, and the paper says the legislature met from 11 o'clock to 11:23 on Monday. And you think, 23 minutes, 23 minutes. But this is what I say to people. And then that would be an informal session. Formal sessions are longer, but you know, sometimes a formal session is an hour, 2 hours. Sometimes a formal session is 14 hours, and it's pretty unpredictable. What I say to people is, Tom Brady's only on the field on Sunday. But does anyone think that's the only time he's thinking about football? No, what else is he doing? Right? He's watching the films, he's going over the practices, he's sitting in meetings. I do a lot of that before we get to game day. And game day is that formal legislative session. So it takes days and days of preparation to get ready for that. So if you ever see that 23-minute thing, you know, give me a call and say, you know, I trust that you're working more than 23 minutes. And then just our constituent and town services. And we'll go through this a little bit quickly, even though it's the most important thing. But this is where we had concentrated our questions on. But it's certainly over 900 individuals, unique individuals, contacted my office in the last year, right? And once somebody calls once, they'll often call again and again and again. So it's many more calls than that, but 900 unique individuals. I hold district hours, and I'm at the Medfield Library, and we'll post it in the paper. Anyone who wants to come and meet with me can. I just come, I sit, and I wait and hope that somebody has something they want to share. We actually drafted legislation out of a visit from a Medfield dad who came to talk about his cellular phones, and how in the end he got his cellular phone on sale, but he had to pay more state sales tax because they wouldn't give the sales tax on the sale price. They would only give it on the actual cost of the phone. And we have drafted legislation, and I'm in a bipartisan effort with a Republican legislator, and we are trying to make sure that the state tax is only for the sale price of the phone. But that came directly from a dad who came into Medfield Library and was frustrated with what had happened. I deal a lot with the Medfield Council on Aging, for which you must be very proud. It's an extraordinary council on aging. And you'll see that I go to the Eagle Scout ceremonies, I go to the Norfolk Hunt Club. I actually went on a tour of the farms in Medfield with Gil Rogers and Rod Smith. That was an extraordinarily fascinating experience for me. I mean, I live within, you know, a rock's throw of the Medfield farms, and had no idea how many farms we had, what was involved with the farms, and how much the farms not only preserve open space, but they actually support the Commonwealth's economy, because the farm means jobs, it means trainers, it means veterinarians, it means horse feed, it means all kinds of things that support our businesses. I deal with the Medfield Foundation, particularly on their volunteer recognition. I think that day more than any other tells me who Medfield really is, and I think that's an extraordinary day. And I deal with the Medfield Coalition for Public Education by auctioning off a visit to the State House. But you can actually come without ever having to win the auction. Okay, and this is the questions that the Scouts were asking me about the Medfield State Hospital, how we passed that legislation, and I just want to repeat what I said, and forgive me for repeating, but I want people who are watching this to know that I am grateful for all of the support and honors that Senator Timilty and I have gotten for getting that legislation passed. But what we did was brought it across the goal line, and I never want anyone in this town to forget the hundreds and thousands of hours that the volunteers in Medfield, your friends and neighbors, people with extraordinary skills and talents that worked all day and came home and went to meetings all night, and this extraordinary town staff, Christine Kretweiler is right here, who led this whole effort. And people like John Harney and Bill Massaro and Steve Knowlton and Ross Smith and Gil Rogers and the people that are meeting right now trying to move us into the next phase. I hope there's a time where everybody can acknowledge the work that they have done and be able to say thank you to them. Okay. And then certainly I attend as many of the Medfield events as I possibly can. I always go to Medfield Town Meeting. There's another place, and I know the Scouts attend that sometimes too. That is another place where you understand what a town's about, how a town makes their decisions. And when we were talking about the Medfield State Hospital property, Medfield has an open town meeting, which means anybody can go who wants to. It also means a lot of times nobody feels compelled to go if it's not an issue that they're concerned about, and you could end up with a lot of people there, you could end up with no people there. When we were making the decision about the Medfield State Hospital property, the entire gymnasium at the high school was full, the cafeteria was full, and it was a unanimous vote. I have never seen anything like that in my life, and I've gone to more meetings than any one person's supposed to go to. Sometimes somebody just says no just to say no, and it was a unanimous yes vote. It was absolutely an incredible insight into the town of Medfield and all the work that had taken place so many people could feel comfortable with that vote. This is what I was telling you about, how a bill becomes a law, and I can actually send this out to the Scouts if you want it. There are 13 steps to how a bill becomes a law. And remember when I said sometimes, at 6:30 in the morning, WBZ goes off on my alarm and they're saying, oh my God, this is happening today. And I'm like, oh my God, right? Well, actually, that's usually about step 3. And what WBZ or another radio station's talking about is that a hearing is going to take place, right? There is so much work that happens as we go through here. And I know we're not going to be able to see these faces on television, but does anyone here, do my Scouts here, you want to say why you think it should take so much work? Why should we? Somebody has an idea, and then somebody files a petition, and then somebody brings it to a public hearing, and people from all over the state come and they testify. And then we send it to another committee, and then we send it to another committee. And then we have to bring it to the floor, and then we have a floor debate, and then we have a vote. Why should we do it like that? This is the kind of thing that makes people crazy who don't know the process. They're like, oh my God, why can't they make a decision?
Because a law is a big deal, and lots of people have to be consulted to make sure that it's fair and it will be okay for people to follow.
So that is a brilliant answer. That's exactly what the answer is. A law is a very big deal. And when we pass the law, we all have to follow it. We have to follow it every day of our lives, to the end of our lives, or till the law somehow gets changed. So you want to have this kind of deliberation. And you actually do want most laws to take a couple of years to pass. You do want that to happen because it takes that long to do that kind of work, that kind of input, that kind of discussion. So, but it takes all those steps. The first time I did a representative's report, a person from the back yelled out and said, oh my God. I said to her, what is it? And so she said to me, I've been working on this issue for 5 years. I'm only on step 3. But it takes a long time to do that. The legislative highlights, now I'm not going to read this to you, but I certainly wanted Medfield Cable to see this and everyone in the room to see this. These are the highlights of some of the bills that were passed, and you can see how broad they are and how much they deal with very big issues. The issue of domestic violence is a huge issue. The issue around autism and how we're going to help families that are dealing with autism is a huge issue and complicated and different for every family. We're talking about financing information technology. That's billions of dollars when we're talking about something like that. So when Mike, and I thought Mike did a great job when he said at the beginning, in a phone call, we were talking about snow removal, we were talking about the train line, we're talking about syringe disposal. The issues that I get to deal with are so broad and so diverse. So in the last session, these were some of the highlights of what we did. And we have people here sitting from our local housing authority who had given us input on the development of that legislation and passing of that legislation. So all of these things happened. I wanted to concentrate on 4 with you, if I could. The first was the act to increase opportunities for long-term substance abuse. This actually was the major opiate crisis bill of the last legislative session. And an interesting thing happened, and I just share this with you because I'm your representative and I want you to know. The person who's the chairperson of the committee is the person in the Commonwealth who knows the most about the issue. They've held all the public hearings, they're interviewing all the people, they're meeting with all the advocacy groups. Our chairman is extraordinary, and her name is Liz Malia. As we had worked on this bill for almost 2 years, Liz Malia was scheduled for surgery, was going into surgery, and the bill was being brought to the floor at the same time. So this was like mind-boggling that the chief engineer wasn't going to be on the site when we're trying to bring the bill across. And the person who was asked to do that was me. And it was a great responsibility. And I'm really pleased to say that that bill passed. That bill passed with an overwhelming vote. And the heart of that bill is to say that people who have substance abuse problems need and deserve and will get care. And you will get up to 10 days of care before you can be denied. And at the 7th day, there can be a utilization review. But one of the things that's happening, and I don't know if it's happening to any of the folks you know, but people are in emergency rooms. They're in crisis. They need to be admitted to an inpatient treatment center, and they're being told no. And they're being told there's not a bed available for them, but they're not being told why. And maybe it's because the place they want to go or need to go doesn't have a bed. We don't have enough beds in the Commonwealth. That is true. But often what it is the insurance company is denying that care. But the person doesn't know it. They're just told the bed isn't available. And we're saying no to the insurance companies. No, you can't deny that care. People need to get emergency care, and they need to get up to 10 days of care. And on the 7th day, you can start reviewing it. But we need to be sure people are getting care. And we've passed that legislation. We are saving lives with that legislation right now. Hard legislation, you can imagine. Insurance companies don't like that legislation. But they're working with us as partners. And I think this is an incredible step forward. There's so much work to do, but the first thing we need to do is deal with the person whose life is in danger at that moment. The second one I wanted to talk to you about is an act relative to patient limits in all intensive care units. Mike shared with you that I'm a nurse. There has been a move in the Commonwealth for years and years and years to be sure that there's safe care for all patients in all hospitals. And that's been a very difficult struggle because not everyone is agreeing on how many patients a nurse can actually take care of. One of the things that we did was there was going to be a referendum, which is a statewide ballot. There was going to be a referendum on this issue with numbers on how many patients a nurse can care for safely. Nurses, how many people here know nurses? Nurses can tell you at the kitchen table how many patients they can care for and how many patients are too much to care for. But it's hard to come up with a number right across the Commonwealth in every single unit, in every single hospital. So we took it off the referendum, the nurses did, and what the agreement was that we would agree on how many patients a nurse can take care of in an intensive care unit. In an intensive care unit, the agreement is a nurse can take care of one patient. And if the nurse is asked to take care of more than one patient, if she's asked to take care of, he or she, 2 patients, there has to be an agreement between that nurse and that manager. And there has to be something that's called an acuity tool that helps to drive that decision making so everybody understands how the decision is made. It is the first time in the nation this law has been passed. California has regulations, but regulations can come and go with governors. In Massachusetts, this is a law now. So the third bill I wanted to talk to you about was an act regulating newborn pulse oximetry. So how many people have ever been to the doctors and they put that little thing on your finger now? And it can tell you what your pulse is, but it also tells you how much oxygen is in your blood. So in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, when babies are born, some hospitals were checking that, and some hospitals weren't. And it was just at their own discretion. And we passed this law, and this law says that in the hospitals in Massachusetts, by regulation, they have to check the baby's oxygen in the blood. 90% of heart defects in babies is detected by putting that little thing on the baby's finger. So it's inexpensive, it's not labor intensive, and now it is happening in every hospital in Massachusetts. In New Jersey, they passed a law like this. The day they passed the law and it went into action, because you pass a law and then 90 days the law is enacted. So everybody had 90 days to get ready. On the 90th day, the law goes into effect, and a baby's life was saved that very day. And this was important to me. We actually did this in one session. It didn't take us years and years to do this. We did this in one session. I was the chief sponsor in the House for this bill and actually got an award from the American Heart Association for this work. So hopefully it will help lots of people. And the Act Promoting Economic Growth Across the Commonwealth, this is something that I just wanted to share because although I look a lot at public health issues and issues around healthcare and healthcare financing in our community hospitals, I do a lot of that work on a day-to-day basis. The economic growth of Massachusetts is where we all live. We all need the Commonwealth to go well. So I care very much about how we're dealing with business, how we're incentivizing good businesses to stay in Massachusetts, how we're trying to redevelop manufacturing in Massachusetts. This bill had a little bit of something for every corner of Massachusetts in it. It's now in grave jeopardy given the budget deficit. But that idea that we have to keep growing Massachusetts and we have to make Massachusetts not only stable, but we have to make it thrive is something that I'm committed to always. So looking forward, we talked about this in our question period, is certainly around energy. We're going to hear a lot of talk around energy. And for some people that means solar. For some people it means the gas bill they're getting today that has increased exponentially over the gas bill they got last month. Healthcare, I'm working very hard on the issue around community hospitals and being able to protect and preserve our community hospitals. I believe that we're seeing so many big shifts in healthcare right now and cost shifts that it's hard to know what's going to survive and what isn't, but I think we have to plan for the future. And in the end, I believe community hospitals have a place. If something happens and there's a pandemic flu, if there's a bioterrorism event, if, God forbid, a bomb goes off someplace, we're not all going into Boston. So we have to be sure that we preserve the community hospitals that are near us. They might look a little bit different in the future. They might function different. We have to figure that out. But I think we need to preserve them. Education we've talked about, transportation, and the opiate crisis we've had a chance to talk about. I don't know what those solutions are going to be yet, but I certainly know those are the questions in front of us. A legislative session is 2 years long. This is the very beginning of the new 2-year cycle. 5,300 bills have been filed as of 5 p.m. Wednesday evening. And we have to sort through those, we have to divide them up into committees, and we have to see what's similar, what's dissimilar, and what we're going to work on. The budget process too, and I'll send this to you too as well, is a multi-step process. You're hearing a lot of talk in the news about the budget right now. The governor, because he's a new governor, usually the governor's budget comes out the end of January. Because he's a new governor, his budget will come out in early March. But already the new governor is facing a deficit. We're hearing lots of talk about this. And for me, it is exactly as I said before. I think a budget is simply our values in action. What we think is important, how much money we're going to put there, and that's usually where the whole discussion comes in. It's not as easy as this is what's coming in and this is what's going out. It's actually where are we going to put it, and are we getting a bang for our buck when it's there. This is the money that comes back to Medfield specifically, and 90% of the money that the Medfield gets from the state is this Chapter 70 money, which is education money, and the Chapter 90 money, which is the roads and bridges money. So you'll see here that there was an increase from FY14 for our schools, FY14, and to FY15, a very small amount of an increase. The unrestricted general government aid is called UGA, and that money is particularly around public safety. It comes back to the town. The town isn't directed how to use that. And then the special education circuit breaker is something that I work on. I had a chance to tell you about my 4 children and my 2 Eagle Scouts. My 2 daughters, one of my daughters has special needs, significant special needs. And so when we're talking about the special education budget, to me, and I was a nurse actually at a day hab center for Charles River for a while there too. When we talk about those numbers are always people to me. And the special ed circuit breaker makes a huge difference in how the town can actually plan for the future, how we can meet the needs of special education students. And you'll hear a lot of discussion about how much the special education budget has risen. And part of the reason for that is that we have many more students with special needs. And one of those reasons is because medical technology has improved so much that babies who might not have survived are surviving now. And we are very fortunate to have them in our lives. We have to deal with the fact that education is expensive, and how are we going to be able to do that? So I deal with this on a consistent basis. When I talk to you about the caucuses that I'm in a caucus for people with disabilities. I'm in the special education caucus as well, with a bunch of representatives trying to figure this out. And I know for our town administrator, the sooner we can figure this out and get more help back to the towns, the better we're going to be. So, and I worked on these two issues around developmental disabilities. There was a move by the state to close all of the sheltered workshops at one point. This is something that's in the blood of the people of Medfield, that they understand the needs of people with disabilities and the need to be able to serve them well. I, as a new legislator, decided to take this on and started interviewing people and talking to people, and dealt with the commissioner and dealt with staff in the executive branch, and then talked to advocacy agencies and drafted a memo to the chair of Ways and Means on a way that I do not know that sheltered workshops are the model we want for the future, but I know for the people that are in sheltered workshops today, that go every single day, feel that they're going to work, get a paycheck for that work, that we cannot take that away until we give them something equal to or better than that. So actually came up with a compromise around a $1 million pilot program, and that's in effect presently, and wrote language for reporting that we should get back so we know exactly what's happening out in the community. And that language was actually used in the budget, so it was an amazing experience for a new legislator. And the emergency dental care for individuals with disabilities was the same thing, trying to follow that money. People who have disabilities who are over 22 years old have grave difficulty getting dental care. And for all of us in this room, we should all know that our oral health is what we call dental care, and your teeth and all, actually has a huge impact on your overall health, and it does for everybody, so we need to pay attention to that. I work on getting money for the Massachusetts LGBTQ Commission for the sexual assault nurse examiner program, and worked very hard for any of the commuters in Medfield who actually go to Needham to get the commuter rail. The commuter rail service was stopped on Saturdays, and with my colleagues fought a long, hard battle to get that restored, and actually have been able to restore the Saturday service to Needham, which is amazing because we all know, like, it's almost impossible to stop a train, right? You wouldn't believe how hard it is to start a train, but we got it back. We got it back. Okay. And just the budget look going forward, you're going to see it's a lot of these same issues. For me as a representative, it's always about local aid. It's always about local aid, what that number is, can we increase that number, how soon can we get that number to the people that are trying to plan the budget. And I told you the Chapter 70 money is the education money. I deal with our community hospital in Needham. I know that some people in Medfield might go to Norwood as well, but I deal with our community hospital in Needham and am working hard on that issue. The library issues are always important to me. And, you know, they say that the libraries is where democracy for the common man resides. And although people started saying that libraries were going to become obsolete, what we've seen is the libraries have adapted and changed, and now people go to the library to learn their computers. People who can't afford a computer, that's where they go to use their computer. And our libraries have become resources for all of these organizations that actually want everything done online, but not everyone knows how to get online, no one has every access, and our libraries are becoming the home to that. And the issues around transportation, particularly for our schools and kids who are moving. If we have children who are homeless, who need to go back to a home district, regional transportation, I deal with those issues a fair amount. And I'm just sharing this with you because you're the people who elect me, and I want you to know this, but I'm not bragging. But it has been an extraordinary 2 years. And on Monday, I'm going to receive the Massachusetts Coalition for Suicide Prevention Legislator of the Year Award. I'm receiving that for much of the work that I did in the gun violence reform bill, which now has a lot of suicide prevention language in it. The gun issue, you might have a variety of opinions about how we move forward with that. The truth is, more people die by suicide by gun than die by homicide. And so now there's suicide prevention training in the gun owner's training. There's suicide prevention hotline on the gun owner's license. And I'm hopeful that in a moment of desperation, somebody sitting there with a gun is going to be able to access the resource they need. I am also the Park and Rec Legislator of the Year, which I think is just wonderful. And that was a nomination out of the town of Needham, and it was for work that I had done on the rail trail, as well as just in our community and around the Park and Rec issues. I had a chance to tell you about the American Heart Association Award. I am the Massachusetts Reading Award advocate winner, and that comes from my work on the Education Committee. And, all of these issues, you'd be surprised how many people in the towns of Needham, Dover, and Medfield are leaders of advocacy groups and directors of big networks. And one of the people from the Reading Association lives in my district and had asked me to come and speak at that. I can go through these other things. One of the things I wanted you to see is that I actually was a keynote speaker for the Dental Students Association because of that budget move around the dental issue for disabilities. In the 3 major dental schools in Massachusetts, only one of them has any kind of program for their students to deal with people with disabilities. And I met with all of the dental students from all of the schools, and it was a great discussion, and they began to talk about how they needed to do more of that kind of training, and they needed more scholarships so they could actually do that kind of work. So that was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And I'm also presently a fellow in the Blue Cross Blue Shield Foundation for Community Health Leadership. And it's one of those places where I'm beginning to think of protecting the community hospitals, but how they might look different in the future, how they will become more of a partner in the community's health. So I wanted to share that with you, but I'm not bragging, I'm not. And I have told all the scouts in this room, I hope everyone in this room feels that they can contact me at any time. I want to hear from you. More importantly, I need to hear from you. You can only represent people that you know well. So I would welcome those calls, those letters, those emails anytime. Be one of my 900 and then call me again and again. So I want to thank you for this. I hope you know that as your representative, I have always felt that you've sent me to do a job. I'm back here to report back to you. So I would like to see if there's any other questions. Do we have any other questions on the cards, Morgan? Okay. Yes.
I have a question, just curious. So you mentioned that 90% of the money that Medfield gets from the state goes to the schools. And you mentioned that in order to fund the hospital, that $300,000 will be put aside every year. So does that mean that schools will be hardest hit by the purchase of the hospital?
No, so the 90% of the money that comes back from the state goes to the schools, Chapter 70 or Chapter 90, the roads and the bridges. And if we could go back to that budget thing, Amanda. So the Chapter 90 money for FY14 was $593,000. And then if you could zip up to the school things, Amanda, the money that came back in 14 was $5,797,000. Then there's an additional 10% there. Your town administrator can give you a better sense of how that money is going to be found and doing that. But I would suspect it's coming out of that 10%. That's a big deal for Medfield. That 10% is a lot of how your town administrator may be planning for other projects that need to happen. So nothing comes free. That $300,000 doesn't come free. That Medfield was able to do that without an override, I think is incredibly important, though, for the people of Medfield. Yes?
What are the numbers on that
So you're asking why it looks like it's random numbers? You know, it's not random numbers, but it's numbers that come out of these very complicated formulas. And there's a formula for Chapter 70, and there's a formula for the Chapter 90 money, and they plug in all these variables, and they come out with this magic number. And so that's why it's not rounded off at all. That's actually the number. So that's how that comes. One of the things I did want to take a minute to address was we just had a vote on the term limits of the Speaker of the House. That's how it was perceived. And I just wanted to share with people my vote on that. I actually voted, there was an amendment to reinstate the term limits in the rules of the House, and I did not vote for that. The Speaker had already been elected on January 5th. So this was not a vote about an individual. It wasn't a vote about the current Speaker. It wasn't about whether we were going to extend somebody's term for another 2 years. It was whether or not we would have term limits for somebody in the House leadership. I didn't vote for that for 2 reasons. One is I don't have term limits. And the benefit to the people that I represent that I don't have term limits is every day I fight for my job. You know, every time I come out to the community, every time I take a vote, every time I speak to a reporter in the paper, it's my job that's on the line because the people in Medfield decide in 2 years whether or not they're going to send me back. I want to be sure that the people that I'm dealing with feel that same kind of pressure and accountability. I don't believe in term limits for me, so I'm not going to believe in it for anyone else. In the House, the majority party is presently the Democrats. The minority party is the Republicans. The minority leadership does not have term limits. So beside the fact that I don't believe in term limits, I also don't believe in unsettling the field and having one party have term limits and another party doesn't. And I just wanted to say that there is no vote that I take that everyone is going to agree with. It's when somebody said, what's the hardest part of your job? You know, I would love that everyone loved everything that I did, but that's not realistic and that's not going to happen. But what everyone deserves is they deserve to know what I'm doing and why I believe I'm doing it. So I wanted to share that with you because I know it's in the press right now. And I would like to think that anyone who has more questions about that would want to discuss it a little bit more would give me a call. And I'd appreciate that. Yes?
Representative Garlick, what's your opinion of the 2024 Olympics being held in Boston and the impact perhaps on state budget tax?
Okay. So that question from Mr. Sullivan, who we usually like to call each other Mike and Denise, is about the Olympics and what's my opinion on that. So my upfront opinion is that I am very proud that the United States would host the Olympics. I am particularly proud that Boston would be the chief lead on that. They're talking about this extended thing up the East Coast. I don't know what that would look like. But for Boston, I think I'm very proud that they've been chosen. It's always going to be, though, how those decisions are made. So my basic instinct is this is something that is positive that has been suggested. What's going to matter is where the money is, where the money comes from, who benefits and who doesn't benefit. I represent the towns of Needham, Dover, and Medfield. I am going to work very hard to be sure that if we move forward with this, that those towns are not harmed or better than that, could somehow receive some kind of benefit if we move forward with that. And I think that in the legislature, there are 160 state representatives. There's a very strong contingent that comes from Boston. There's 16 representatives from Boston, so it's 10% of the legislature. 90% of the legislature is going to be trying to make the decisions that I'm trying to make, what's good for their district, and how we move into the future in a way that everyone benefits, and that the suburbs particularly are not left out of the equation. Any other questions? Yep.
So in my civics class, we're learning about politics in other states, and in Arizona, they just passed a law about civil having high schoolers having to take a test about knowing about the government. Do you think the Massachusetts would ever think about putting that law in place?
So I'm going to just repeat your question, Nick, so the television people know. And what Nick has kind of asked is, do we, like Arizona, do I think that we should give a test to high school students to see if they understand enough about their government? So I guess I would reserve my right about whether I think there should be a test or not. What I do think, and I think it from the tip of my toes to the top of my head, is that we constantly have to involve young people in government. We have classes that come into the State House, and it's a very high priority for me. And Amanda usually goes on the tour with the classes who come, and then I bring the classes into the chamber, and I talk about my job, I talk about how I vote, I talk about my vote up on the board and transparency in that voting and how information is relayed to the public if they want it. If they want it, that information is all available. I go into the 8th grade in the Needham school system, and I certainly would come to Medfield and teach a 53-minute class 18 times, because we have 18 sections of 8th graders, on how a bill becomes a law. And the students become representatives and senators, and they fight about issues, and they vote, and they sometimes get very animated about that vote. And I think that's part of my role. I actually am very, very proud to be a representative. I think the work is very important. I feel responsible to it. I think it makes a decision in our lives today. I think it's my chance to help with the future and how I'm hoping the Commonwealth will move into the future and how we will deal with people and what it is we value. And I am heartbroken at some of the discussions that I hear about government, about people who work for the government, like I do every single day, like our town administrator does, like our building inspector does, like our chief of police, who is here tonight, does. And I want to have a better discussion about that. So I don't know that you need a test, but I do think on a day-to-day basis, we should be sharing more about what government is and how we do that government. I think we need more troops like Troop 89 coming to events just like this and knowing that they're welcome and they're wanted here. And I think that work, we have to struggle to do that work because the messages we're getting, both formal and informal messages, are making people think that their vote doesn't count and they don't matter in the system, and that's not true. And don't let anyone take it away from you. Don't let anyone take it away from anyone else, because that really is what your quality of life is, how much you care about that and how much you contribute to it, no matter what your decision is. When I said not everyone agrees with me, that's all right. I don't need everyone to agree with me. I need everyone to be involved in the discussion. Okay. Any other questions? Well, I want to say, for a cold winter night, this has been a warm, wonderful evening, and I really appreciate this. So thank you very much, everybody.
Hi, I'm Richard DeSaga, and you are watching Medfield.tv.